in brownfield sites. Right. Okay, so where are crossings needed in brownfield sites? So the same kind of principles apply for brownfield sites as it's a very different problem here. These are established neighbourhoods, they're established, they're built, they've got existing movements, and they're very often very expensive to retrofit. We don't have this clean slate. So really the problem becomes where are crossings most needed in brownfield sites, and reflecting that we have limited budgets to accommodate these. We also have an existing road environment. So this is where we bring in, we've got risk, we've got connection, and we also need to think about feasibility. Where is it feasible for us to get in appropriate crossing facilities to connect our neighbourhoods and address the risk that is there? So this is where the flying pig comes in as well. Feasibility. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And we had a few questions before about some of the regulations that apply for the different types of crossings. So we've got two different regulatory control systems that regulate who has priority at crossing. So the first one is the for a pedestrian path, that's the pedestrian crossing line marking and pedestrian crossing signs. So you see that here on the left. This is defined in the Australian standard.
Are you sharing your slide
to those paths? Oh my gosh.
Apologies.
Interesting. Oh, were you not seeing the slides then? Let me see. Gosh, it's all gone on today. Hang on.
Perfect.
Right. Didn't see the flying pig. There we go. This is how we've introduced anyway. I'll just go. So where are crossings most needed in brownfield sites? Sorry, thank you, Hafez. That's the third slip up, so we should be good now. So with the pedestrian path, we have it's regulated, as I said, in Australian standard 1742.10, and that's the regulatory control system. For a shared path or a cycleway, that's where in Queensland, it's most commonly used is that we use the giveaway signage and the giveaway line marking. And so that's defined in Australian standard 1742.9, which is the cycling standard. So these are the two different kind of regulatory control systems that we can use, usually for a pedestrian only path or mostly pedestrian users, and usually for a shared path. So there's rules for installation, and this affects the feasibility. So in the Australian standard, it talks about these crossings cannot be installed in places where there's more than one lane of moving traffic. And the risks around that Ken will talk about a little bit later. Speed limits on approach, so not in this environment. Speed limits on approach need to be 50 kilometres an hour or less. So not in a 60 kilometre an hour environment, which is often in many of our kind of collector and higher order streets. This is the kind of environment where we have problems getting people across the road. And 85th percentile needs to be less than 60 kilometres an hour. It also says not on an arterial unless it's a slip lane, and that 85th percentile speeds on the slip lanes and things. So we have to understand the rules that govern where we can install raised crossings, because this will impact where we can put them. In the last, just in the last 12 months, the Queensland Department of Transport and Main Roads actually updated their Queensland Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices to say that in new roundabouts, we should be installing raised crossings on all approach. So the standard treatment now in Queensland is to have raised crossings on all approaches. There's no restriction on speed limit, so this can happen in a higher speed environment because the roundabout already creates that low speed environment, regulating it as well. It's something that I use in terms of where we need crossings, and I think there's turning vehicles and things. You think, well, can we put a roundabout in here? It's very consistent with safe systems. So introducing roundabout and raised crossings together can be a really good way of getting them into the network. So even in higher speed environments, provided we step it down for the roundabout, we can do that as well. When we're installing them at roundabouts, we go back to that principle of state of awareness. So at side roads roundabout, we install them 1 car length back from the traffic control device, so that the driver's just thinking about the path users when they're approaching the crossing. They don't have to think about anything else. So that's that state of awareness principle where we separate those tasks as well. Session 4 goes into more detail about placement at roundabouts. We just thought we'd introduce that because everybody's always itching for some details. So how do we apply the rules? Now, we want to be very firm about these are the rules. But road safety platforms, as Fez talked about, they're efficient, they're safe, they're value for money treatments that provide connectivity for pedestrians. So we want to install them where you can to facilitate safe crossing facilities. You know, they're often going to be cheaper than the alternative treatments. And so instead of just saying this is where we can't install them, we want to be modifying our road environments to install raised crossings if possible. So install other treatments where you can't. So just applying that kind of principle that they're very safe, they're very cost effective, they're very efficient, then we try to modify our road environments to install them where we can. So just in this example, what we've done is we've reposted as 50 kilometres an hour and we've installed the raised crossing that helps to reinforce that lower speed. Signalised crossings are required on multi-lane roads. There's not much we can do about that in most situations. And installing a roundabout, as I said before, can be a way to break up like long lengths of road, provide for all road users and install crossings in as well. So I'm actually thinking about roundabouts more and more in my active transport projects because of this. So other feasibility considerations, things like sidelines, drainage, cost, practitioner and organisational experience. We'll talk about that a little bit later in our data, but that's kind of one of the issues as well. This is just a snapshot from the Queensland Raised Priority Crossing Guideline. So this is a guideline that Queensland put together, which those yellow crossings you saw before, they were constructed according to that guidance. It can be one of the ways to get around the feasibility issues is to quote the research and studies that have been done into these types of facilities. So this extract, as part of that guidance, Queensland Transport and Main Roads undertook a number of studies of existing raised crossings at side roads and looked at how effective they were at managing risk. And then some of the extracts of that research is produced in this report here. But they didn't just look at sites that were treated, they looked also at sites that weren't treated. And this is one of the examples of a site that wasn't treated. And you can see there's just kind of a summary of how it performed there. So when I was first recommending raised crossings, this kind of information gave me confidence when I didn't have personal experience of installing them to recommend them and how we could address the risk factors. So session 4, again, we'll go into more detail there. So,
Prue, we have 2 practical questions here. Sean is asking if we change the road environment to lower speed, can we still have a raised crossing if we have 2 lanes of traffic in each directions?
Ken will go into that in more detail. There are some suggestions about how the risks could be mitigated, but I don't understand aware of any guidance that supports that at this stage. The other thing we talk about is the safe system assessment process in terms of saying, okay, well, you know, it's not what we want to do, but is it better? And that's a good framework to use for that kind of situation as well. So there are frameworks when there's not obvious answers. But Ken will go. A good question for Ken too.
Also, there is research shown that says multi-lane roads are not really good for crossings unless we do some really good safety measures. So I can share that research with you as well, but you know, it's a really good point. We've got 2 more questions. Angela says, so on an 80k kilometer per hour with a large roundabout, could we lower the speed to 60k and put a raised crossing on it? 80k?
It would need to be posted to step it down in that environment according to the Queensland guide, is my understanding. And then you would also need to be achieving that 85th percentile speed passing point. as well, which is with the roundabout, it would, you know, I expect that would be achievable. So it's something, but that's under the Queensland guidance. But yeah, it needs to be stepped down because I think 70 might be the limit in terms of where that's possible. I'm not sure, I'd have to check, but that is in the Queensland supplement. Was one other thing I was going to say then. It's very similar to the rules. What's the way they've updated it is they've adopted similar rules for slip lanes and roundabouts because it's a similar situation that we're actually at. It's a single and only single lane as well.
Okay. Also, two more comments. Like Jubin and Pete, like so concur on this point that there's
Yep.
a concept called multiple threats in road safety. When you have cars like blocking each other and hitting pedestrians, so that might be a problem with multi-lane. So we agree with that. And Masood says, what if we put a median down the road and break the crossing? Can we do that and put it on multi-lane?
Well, that is Ken actually has an example of where that's been suggested. So yeah, that's the suggested treatment in terms of if it can be endorsed and approved. Yeah, you're spot on in terms of that's how you do it, to break it up and to open up those sight lines and improve those sight lines as well.
Merci beaucoup.
It's if you want to see some crossings on multi-lane roundabouts, there's a city called Carmel, Carmel, in America, which is the roundabout capital of America. And then I don't recommend them. I'm not endorsing them or recommending them, but goodness me, do they have some big roundabouts with some big crossings on them. But yes, I think everybody's spot on with that. Okay, we better keep going. So we're looking at methodologies for brownfield sites. So what we want to talk about here is there's not explicit guidance on saying where you should install a raised crossing or even explicit guidance on saying where you need a crossing. I think it's probably a bit of a gap in our road design guidance that we're not triggering, you know, requirements for crossings in environments where they're much needed. Hafez, what are we having today? It's not an apple, I don't think. Anyway,
I want to give you a human face, but also I'm starving. So I go without video for a second, finish it and come back. Sorry, I apologize.
It's lunchtime in Melbourne. So we've got three different methodologies we're going to talk to today in terms of crossing upgrades, established demand, and community-led planning. Now, in terms of these methodologies, they're simple, they're kind of repeatable. You can tell the story of the methodology of how you're selecting your sites and things. I wanted to choose methods that could be done in small agencies with limited planning information and data that could be very easily applied to provide a structure around this. And we're also tying it back to those three things of going where there's risk, where we need connection, and where they can be feasible. So we want to look at that as well. So first, thinking about crossing upgrades. So one way of looking for where we can provide raised crossings is to look at existing crossing locations. So these have often popped up as a result of community requests or observations and things to service existing desire lines. So they can be a good indicator of where people currently need connection. And they can be a good site to kind of understand that, yes, we're not consistent with safe system principles in this situation. You know, go through our safe system principles and can easily, and that we're not applying them. So crossing upgrades, existing desire lines, risk has previously been identified at this site. Often the sight lines have already been considered and we have existing lighting. So if you just look at the top right-hand side of our screen, in terms of feasibility, these are often sites that are really feasible. You know, we've got all those things in place already. Connection, it's often a place we've already established that connection is needed. And there's often already some risk there. So it's kind of like a crossing up. We're providing a safety feature on a crossing that really doesn't have much of a safety feature. The refuge crossings, they address that predictability. They make it more predictable because you only have to think about one stream of traffic at a time. But certainly not a forgiving environment, and it is 100% wrong experienced user, the user who might have a vision impairment and might not be able to pick up in that traffic. So that's it. Another really good place to look at crossing upgrades is at roundabouts. So roundabouts are often these key junctions in the network for people walking and cycling, and they're already a low speed environment. Even if the surrounding streets are posted at 60 kilometres an hour and it's going to be difficult to get crossings in, at these sites, you've got the lower speeds environments, and they work really well together, the raised crossing and the roundabouts. We've seen that in town centres a lot. So, you know, it's been used as a treatment that's really high quality for pedestrians, and potentially it could be used in other locations where we have lower pedestrian volumes, but it's more challenging to cross the road, so to provide that safety. And many of you picked that up in your homework task. That's exactly, we've seen that in each course so far, so that's really interesting. So this is a good way of looking at where there's risk, because roundabouts is often really low and difficult, where they're really feasible, and where as well. So it ticks off really well on that. So that's, you know, like a way how we're going to upgrade our network. The next one is established demand. So, you know, at its simplest form, this is kind of about site observation, areas that people are mobile. It can be a systematic approach, as we're going to do, you know, 200 metres around every school and make sure we try and address that. It might look at, you know, all of our town centres, making sure we've got connectivity, or it might to our town centres. So it can be based on observations, it can be based on different types of facilities and targeting them, but looking at where there's obviously a need for users. So this is a school site at the bottom here, and this is a regional town centre with a rail trail in the top side. So you can see both areas where there's obviously established demand. It can be a systematic approach, you know, if you're going to use the same system throughout your towns. So connection, feasibility and risk, that can all be considered there. Another place where established demand might be useful to consider is looking at public transport stops. So if we look at bus stops, often they're on roads that are difficult to cross. We've got patronage data, so you can see which bus stops have the highest patronage rates. You can often see which bus stops have older users and younger users, which people are using concession cards and things. So this can be a really good way of targeting where it's most needed. So you're not doing every bus stop in the region, but you're doing the ones where there's risk and where you've got that high patronage or those especially vulnerable users. A good thing about that as well is that you have the data afterwards to look at how, if it's impacting your patronage after you've done the work. So it's a nice way to tie into these existing data sets. Risk, connection, feasibility can be challenging in that environment, but certainly we can install them. So the third methodology I'm going to talk about today is community-led planning. So this one's more involved, but it's still very simple and can be very easy to deliver and give you a really good data set to work from. So this is all about tying into community knowledge, and the community has a really good understanding as a collective, has an amazing understanding of where are the severance points. Like if you go and talk to communities, ask people in the street, you know, where do you have problems? Or one of my favorite questions is if you ask people about if their kids walk or ride to school, and they say, oh, we'd love it if they could, but there's one point. And it's always really interesting to know what's that one point, and is that something that's fixable? So they can tell us where does it feel unsafe, they can tell us where there's latent demand, what are the priorities, and they have existing communication channels that we can often tap into rather than trying to form our own communication channels. So this is why I think that's a really useful approach. It's also good because often they've already kind of done the work for us in terms of where is their risk and where is their connection. Like they're putting that through in their lived experiences. So there's 4 steps in the community-led planning process. The first one is about having a system to find where the problems are, find out where we need improvements in the network. The next one is about defining and prioritising, because we're probably going to get a whole heap of problems, and we need to work out what are the most important problems to solve so that we can put it into a plan and it's not just overwhelming. The next one is about scoping or planning, so understanding specific solutions that are relevant to each problem, and then the designing and building. So In this process, it goes from kind of, this one's based on school planning around school communities. It goes dominated by parent, carer, community input, to then, as it works its way through, being dominated by the engineering input to address the issues that have been concerned. So I'm going to go through some of the results of some of our community led planning kind of processes. So this is where we were surveying school parents around a school, and to ask them, and we asked them really specific crossings, really specific questions like, where are safer crossings needed? And so these are some of the results we've got from the school. So this school, we got, I think we had about 80 parent responses. So, you know, it's a pretty simple methodology for getting quite a lot of responses from parents. At one of our schools, we got 1 in 4 families from the school responded, which was a really amazing response rate, which is not actually to be celebrated, because it was actually, I think, related to how difficult the road network was. But what you'll see here is from about 80, I think 80 to 90 parents. And these heat spots show the places where a number of people responded. So we give them up to 10 markers on the map, just like you got to do when you were doing your own community survey. And you'll see this is a side road crossing. So again and again in these kind of surveys, the side road crossings have come up as locations of concern. Before we had this data, I found it really difficult to convince other practitioners that it was worth investing in improving the side roads, because people saw it as a low risk environment and not a concern. But in each survey, it seems to come up. And at-grade zebra crossing, so just like the practitioners, the parents identified that this doesn't have a safety feature. There was actually specific comments about, can we have it raised, or can we have some speed humps either side of it? And an existing refuge crossing. So the refuge crossings have popped up again and again. But what you'll notice from this map is, you know, we've got 80 parent responses. They've each got 10 marks on the map, and we don't get, you know, hundreds of different sites. We get really clear trends around specific areas. Hafez.
So in the last module, we talked about pedestrian demand analysis and modeling, and how it can be used to address latent demand.
Yeah.
Angela mentions here the community-led planning can also be a good tool to identify and address latent demand. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think I think that's what it does really well in terms of latent demand. Many of the places, like I've heard many times that, you know, we've done a pedestrian count and there's not many people, you know, there's only pedestrians there. And it's like, well, we're building a big footpath and we don't expect that to be the case in future. And we, you know, I like to go back to my experience as a parent. Like if we're going to walk or cycle to school or the swimming pool or something, you know, one of my objectives is that nobody gets killed or seriously injured. And if there is a good chance that one of us will, then we won't walk or cycle to the swimming pool. We will take the car. It's so I think we need to go into kind of, you know, the hearts and minds of these people and say, what do we need to do to make it, you know, safe for your kids or you to be comfortable for people to walk or cycle to school. So yeah, as Angela said, I think it's a great easy way of tapping into that latent demand, but you need it to be around a community of interest. So, you know, it works well, small scale, perhaps integrating with some modeling and things like that would be for a larger one, or especially when you've got greenfield sites coming online and things as well. You know, this is capturing the existing demand and latent demand, but it's not going to be capturing, you know, what other things might be happening in future if new infrastructure is being built and stuff. But yeah, I'm impressed. You know, it is an easy method. So these are some other sites that were picked up in this survey. So this is a mid-block cut through, so another refuge crossing. Roundabouts have popped up again and again, as we, you know, talked about, and similar to practitioners' experiences. When we've done these surveys as well, we've asked the community, you know, what works well and what doesn't work well. So how concerned are you about your child using this type of crossing? So yeah, we had that great question before about the language around crossings, and it's not easy to get it right. Like we've quite a bit of thought into how do we describe each of these crossings, and consensus was that a photo is the best way, and then we did our best with the words as well. So, you know, but we have got very interesting information from that. So this graph shows the results of from one of the surveys when we asked people how concerned are you about children you care for using these types of crossings. So if we think about a raised zebra crossing or raised, about 80% of parents, almost 80% of parents, not concerned. Right. So this is a treatment that, exactly as we'd want, most of the community are comfortable for the most vulnerable members of the community to use. So, you know, it's a strong treatment. In terms of a refuge crossing, we've got about 10% of the community feeling comfortable with that. So if these are the types of crossings that we're providing to get kids to school, it's not surprising that a lot of kids are being driven to school, and this kind of data can feed into that. You'll see that the untreated side roads perform, you know, most people concerned or very concerned about that, and untreated crossings as well. But these untreated side roads, really high levels of being concerned about that. I just want to go through too, because one of the things that I think that the community do quite well is that similar objective of not being killed or seriously injured. They intuitively pick up on the environments where kids are going to be killed or seriously injured, or they feel like their life is in danger. So, you know, in terms of these raised zebra crossings, raised pedestrian crossings, really strong safe system alignment, really, you know, a favourite of the community. As we go down, untreated crossings, well, they've got high speeds, they don't have predictable environments. Same with side roads, not well aligned with safe system principles or with community expectations. So this is where I think we're in a really good time for traffic engineering in terms of what our road design guidance is saying we should be doing and what the community needs us to do for vulnerable road or active transport users is well aligned. So just to summarize, so we've gone through those three different, gone through kind of crossing upgrades, just a really basic kind of process for upgrading your network, improving it, established demand, and the community-led planning examples. So I've got a few questions now. We've got an action time, so we're just going to use the chat for this one. Okay, the spots on this map show. So just use the chat to do your answers to this one, please. We need to bring the chat up. Are we still having problems with internet? Right.
It is okay. I mean, like, you know, we can get where you're going. Yeah.
Okay, the spots on this map show an unusually precise storm forecast. B, future planning for electric helicopter air taxi landing pads. Or C, places where safe system principles, parental concerns, children and vehicles most likely collide. I quite like that statement. I think it's clever, but it's, yes, it's C. That's what I think is going on there anyway. Let's go to the next one. And Wombat is judgmental Wombat C. True or false? 8 out of 10 parents said they were not concerned when their kids use this type of crossing. It's an efficient group. I like this, just T and F kind of thing. This is amazing. Efficiencies. Okay, yep, true, that's right. That's what we found in our parental surveys. Strong confidence in this type of crossing. Thank you, judgmental. Likelihood and consequences of higher because, and I'll just play the video. Vehicle speeds are greater than 50. Crossing is frequently used by children. Crossing is frequently used by elderly people. There are no other crossings within 1 kilometre in each direction. All of the above.
And pedestrian cannot fly.
Fly, yeah, yes. So we need that pig to help out. You'll provide flying pig services.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, so all of the above. I think the only one that I might have fudged there is the crossing is frequently used by elderly people. I know it's definitely used by children. They are accessing the bus stops, and the comments that I got from my community survey is that, you know, people are very concerned about kids using it. Kids have to get around. They're so, you know, their needs are so mobile. They need to get to school as well as all the enrichment activities and things. I haven't actually seen use it, but I've spoken to people who want to use it and are too frightened to use it. So I probably should be a bit more accurate in that situation. And who have said that they can't get to the shops because they can't get across that road. Okay, quick stretch. We are going to keep going. How are we going for time? I think we're going quite well. So we're going to go through our SWAN. Excellent work. It's taking it very seriously. We're going to go through our Swan Hill case study now, and we're going to look at where did we decide crossings are needed. For those of you who didn't get to do the survey, you are welcome to do it afterwards. It will give you that experience of being a participant. And so we're going to go through some of the survey results here. So you'll see some of the questions and things. Now, bear with me, it's not perfect, but we will just run the video. I might just run the video and might talk after this, just because of our internet things. So this is the results of our data. Feel free to use the chat to note anything that you find interesting about this.
Prue, while you're doing that, Pete
Yeah.
mentioned a comment that maybe benefit from your thoughts.
Yeah.
How do we engage with driver community to bring them along the journey?
Yes. To bring them along for the journey. I can only Bridget is a good person to talk about, you know, how we design the roads to have drivers on high alert at the appropriate time when needed. So that's an important, really important for our crossings. We need people to be on high alert. I like that they're raised because I think that kind of gives them an instruction manual, tells people how to approach a crossing. You know, you need to lower your speed and have your foot on the brake. That's what the raising it does. So it addresses that. But in terms of it being socially or politically acceptable to put raised crossings in, from my experience, it is, you know, practitioners are very concerned about that. Communities, like when I've surveyed school communities, you know, they have asked for lower speed limits, they've asked for crossings, they've asked for raised crossings. So I think we need to get better at communicating with segments of our community that maybe we haven't been. I suggest schools, because we have a lot of congestion around schools. If we want to get those kids out of cars, then providing safe environments, and then we can actually get our road networks working more efficiently. But, you know, there is a small cost, which is a small reduction in speed, but it enables people to get around by different modes, which can add to efficiency in the network.
Yeah, also, I think, like, you know, in response to Pete's comment, we need
also
to
protecting,
maybe,
you know, I think. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I think I might have cut out then, is that right?
A bit.
Okay, can we get through this?
We can. You have. We
can. Okay. So this was really interesting. This is our results. I find it interesting. We had a lot of focus around the town centre. We had some really good sites and great sites between around roundabouts, complex intersections, between the hospital and the town. What I notice with the practitioner data versus the community data is the community data, whereas the practitioners might identify, like we see here, this entire spine, communities are often more focused. They know exactly where they want it. They've got a more precise kind of definition and things. So it's easy, I think, easier as a community member who uses the area frequently to know, actually, this is where we need the crossing. So I think, you know, this is really, it's really interesting. It's great. I love that we've picked up some of the schools, the connections to the sporting facilities. I will note that obviously it was a very long time ago that I went to school, but the Grey Street shop, corner shop, is still there. And from my experience, it had the best lollies. So nobody seemed to pick up that this is the place where you need a crossing between the school and the services in terms of kids going to lolly shops and things like that. This is the kind of information that communities can bring us. Now, can you hear Hafez? Right. So we've gone into that. So we also asked you to tick the places you thought about when selecting crossing sites in Swan Hill. And this is an interesting list to it was basically developed from a brainstorming exercise that I did. One of the things we noticed, or I noticed later, is that there's no kind of pub or something, indicating someone who has any nightlife or something. So we've got our unconscious biases in terms of the attractors that we frequent and we might think of as important. And it's really important that we challenge these unconscious biases and think about our whole communities. So it's just a way of kind of going through and going, hey, yeah, and we nearly all thought about the town centre. That's a priority to us. We're all practitioners who often work in built up areas and around town centres or city centres. Most of us were kind of on to thinking about schools and hospitals and supermarkets and things. We weren't thinking so much of industrial areas. Swan Hill is extremely hot in summer and the swimming pool is quite a big attractor. So that's something local people can tell us about. Yeah, very specific kind of attractors. But I just thought it was a nice way of kind of capturing and trying to think about those unconscious biases. We also asked people what some of their methodologies were for thinking about where crossings are required. And I think we got some really nice responses here. So holistic consistency for route priority, i.e. connecting multiple uses and making it more attractive. Some of the busier streets with relatively high movement could be better served with signalised intersections, and so then they weren't selected. We considered mid-block crossings as well as side roads and intersections. We've got someone thinking about, started out by thinking about roads, but evolved to thinking about communities of interest and how they use the roads, and where a number of different trips could concern. So as well. I said before that what I found is that in the practitioner data versus the community data, that the practitioner data is a bit more spread out, as you'd expect, because we haven't been to the site, we don't know the facilities, we don't know where the best lolly shop is near the school and that kind of stuff. Whereas the community has this very specific information that we can tap into, that they can understand sightlines and things. I've got comments about the sightlines at this crossing and they can give us really detailed information really quickly. So this is just a snapshot of a different project where we've got the practitioner data on the right and the community data on the left. You'll see we've got relatively similar things picked up, but in terms of which data set I would find it easier to prioritise what the most important facilities are, I would certainly find it a lot easier with that community data. It's clearer and there's stronger trends about the locations where it's needed. So that's a summary of an example of using this community-led plan process. Now, we've got another action time here. So we're going to kind of recap on some of the things that we've covered earlier on in the session. So which of the sustainable safety principles is this facility struggling with? Functionality, predictability, homogeneity, state of awareness, or forgiveness. So again, we're just going to use the chat this time. A, functionality. That's interesting. A, D, state of awareness, A and B, D. Homogeneity. Oh my gosh, this is great. It's nearly all of them. Okay, I like the confusion. I think it is struggling with a few of them. Yeah, let's just go through that. Functionality, it's quite a high order road with a shared zone, and that functional, functionality, that doesn't really work when you've got a high order road, because we need to provide through access, and we're trying to create a shared zone where people will just give way to each other. So I think it's struggling in terms of functionality. Predictability, it's certainly struggling with predictability. So we've got this shared zone, but people aren't necessarily expecting, drivers aren't expecting pedestrians to step out, pedestrians aren't necessarily expecting drivers to give way. It's not a predictable environment what's going to go on. How would you feel with someone who had a vision impairment crossing in this environment? How would you feel with a child? I find some of these shared zones challenging for children, because they seem to be tuned into the pavement markings and they, understand a road. But when we do this kind of thing, it's not clear. Homogeneity, we've got the speeds pretty low, but they're certainly not as low as they need to be for people to just interact. State of awareness and forgivingness. So it does everything a little bit, but nothing well. And there's probably enough chaos there that it doesn't work well. Can raised crossings be installed on bus routes? Hopefully there's a pretty good clue in this this session. Yeah, obviously we've got a bus route here. I don't think we explicitly really discussed it today. We will talk, Ken will go into more the details around bus routes and how we design ramps for buses and how we can that, but certainly I would say they can be, and it is something that's essential to consider, because when we think about people with vision impairments, they are most likely more likely to be using the bus because they don't have access to a motor vehicle. So that's really important. Judgmental wombat. Okay. This crossing, so we've got another poll. Here's our last poll. This crossing is on a 60km/h road. It connects to schools, bus stops, and it connects residents to the town centre, a bit like the example we had before. Complaints have been received about this crossing and others along the street. Use the poll to describe how you feel about the following treatments to treat this problem. I'll just play the video for a second. We don't need to do it for long, but gives you an idea of the relatively high traffic volumes. Speeds are relatively high. 60 km/h is well outside safe system principles. Okay, so we'll bring up the poll, Hafez. Is it mid-block? Yes, it is mid-block. Yep.
Cool. A third of the participants.
We're thinking that's good. I think this is a thinking one. I like watching it jump around.
So read 80%. Shall we share?
Yes, let's share. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yes. Fantastic. Okay. So what have we got here? Put this in, it's kind of a bit of a summary question. So we've got a signalised pedestrian crossing, and we've got pretty mixed. It's fairly evenly distributed. Preferred, maybe if I had to. I think we can justify a case for each of those. What do you think, Fez?
I would say, like, this is a case that I would actually do something more significant and spend more time and money. I think I would go signalised crossing. So my answer would be preferred. Yes.
Preferred. Yep. A raise. So a signalised pedestrian crossing, that's certainly something to be considered in this environment, and something that would be, a great outcome and a connection in this community. So preferred, maybe if I had to. I think I'd probably be more in the maybe, or if I had to.
But why is that?
Anyway, why is that? I like well, a couple of things. I think the rest of the road corridor needs to be improved as well. I think there would be safety advantages for reducing the speeds on the corridor for vehicles turning in and out of the corridor. And because we need a few of these, I think we need at least 2 crossings along this whole corridor if I looked at it as a whole. But having said that, you know, would we get that across the line? I don't know, you know, would we get a signalized intersection across the line? We need a lot, you know, quite a bit more money, but it would, from a standards, it would be a lot easier. So, so a signalized intersection with crossings. So we've got a few people saying preferred maybe, and if I had to, so we've got some mixture there as well. Like it could be considered, if you are signalizing it, it means that we're providing a more predictable environment for other movements as well, like to protect those side impact crashes and things at these speeds. They're likely to be serious or fatal, so can think about doing that as well. Raising signalized intersection with crossings. So we've got a few more saying preferred and maybe for that one. So then we start to bring in those safe system principles. So we're creating that really predictable environment with the signalized intersection and separating the traffic flows, but we're lowering the vehicle speeds as well. Reduce the posted speed limit and install raised crossings along the corridor. Yeah, we've got pretty high support for that. I would see this as one of the, you know, the most and more challenging environments for this kind of facility. And I think this is where we kind of are with raised crossings at the moment, in terms of saying, hey, you know, we can bring them into different types of environments, and there might be willingness to change that environment to meet the needs of a raised crossing as well. So we've got some scattered there, but we've got people thinking about that as a preferred option if it can be achieved. A roundabout with raised crossings. So we've got, yeah, a mixture there, but we've got quite a few people thinking that's preferred as well. You know, I think if you could fit it in, which you don't think you can in this situation, that would be a really good option in this environment, because it would break up the speed, you know, stop it feeling like a runway, as well as then you can change your other intersections to left in, left out, and get all sorts of benefits for the corridor and things like that. So I think that would be a nice one. So yeah, there's no black and white answers with that. That one's all about kind of putting our information together and going, you know, what are we going to consider? Because we want to kind of leave this course thinking, you know, when do we need to leave things on the table as an option, but be realistic about, you know, how we might go with it.
And also, Prue, I love your comment about you need to consider the whole area or the whole corridor, which goes really nicely with what we discussed in the first module. In terms of when you're developing actions, it's more mass action and area wide. So I totally agree with you. Yeah,
great. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. So I think we've just got one more. Okay, so I just wanted to bring it all together. I know we've gone through an awful lot today. Just a reminder that in the resources, there is that summary sheet, and that's trying to bring it together, because I feel like we've been a bit ambitious with covering quite a few concepts. So anyway, at the start of the session, we were looking at what and why, and we looked at kind of those 3 criteria that we're trying to achieve with these types of crossings and what we're talking about in this situation. Then we looked about where we currently think about putting raised crossings in, and we looked at, you know, there was a lot of a variety of sites. I was really, you know, it's been really interesting to see how many roundabouts have been highlighted in this process and in our surveys as part of this, as well as looking at people are really looking to challenge kind of the change or the boundaries that we have around where we put them in at the moment, that people are quite open to that. We then looked at our, let me just see, our greenfield sites and the need to provide a really high level of permeability in our neighbourhoods and connection, and put that in right at the start if we can, using also those safe system principles, understand, okay, where do we need to actually treat this? Where is there enough risk that we need to treat it? You know, if we can design our streets to be slow enough and predictable enough, we may not need crossings, but in other situations, we'll need quite a few of them. then we looked at brownfield sites, and we had those 3 different kind of methodologies, and really, you know, these are not complicated ones, and it probably is my kind of experience coming through of working with regional towns and smaller councils and things, and having tools that are quite simple to implement for those kind of smaller and local networks and things like that. Also implemented by kind of the larger network plans and things. We then look at the rules that govern it, because we really need to know this, because we need to work with them and around them. So we're not just going to use those as a dead end. We're going to use those to challenge the boundaries and get good crossings in many places as we can. And then we had our case study for Swan Hill. And then I think we have 2 more minutes for questions and summaries. I think we've just had some fantastic questions in this session, so it's been really good. If there's any more, would love to get to them.
Absolutely. And Prue, you made it. You went through all material within the time, and also you surpassed the challenge of the internet, which is congratulations. You showed that, through resilience, we can go through problems. So I want to thank you personally, because every time I sit at your courses, I learn shit that I didn't know before. And I'm very thankful for that. So I also want to thank participants. As I mentioned to you prior to this course, I really like this crew. They're really engaged. And thank you very much, team, for your comments, questions, and all of that.
Yeah. Yes.
And look at this like flurry of love for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Honestly, it's funny we're interacting through virtually, but you can see that we've got a really engaged group with lots of knowledge and things coming through here. So yeah, reach out if you want to discuss anything after. We're all here, aren't we?
Please do, and have a lovely day. And Prue, well done. More power to you.
Thanks, Hafiz. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.